Hello, welcome to Marriage Mondays with Nick and Trina Brinson. Just want to welcome you here tonight as we give you another edition of what we consider to just bring you some enlightenment upon your marriage, some things that can help you out to make your marriage better. And we just want to thank you for always coming to join us when you can, live while we're here, or when you go back and look at it when it's not live or recorded. So we just want to thank y'all in advance.
So we represent Crown Kingdom Cultural Center. Of course, our pastors, Bishop Finest Bush Jr. and Denise Bush. So we, as always, just as a reminder, we come to you from a Christian platform, and our goal is simply to support um, marriages, to give you resources, to give you ideas so that you can constantly work to improve yourself, which improves your marriage, and to improve your union. So we have a lesson planned for you tonight. That is something we've had to deal with, and I can't imagine there's any couple that hasn't dealt with this issue, or if you haven't, maybe you can be prepared for it if you're newlywed.
Yes.
Um, so we're going to talk about imbalance, identifying imbalance. Because sometimes imbalance can become so, um, what's the right word? Commonplace to you that you don't recognize it as something that's out of order. It becomes so familiar, so commonplace, that you don't recognize the damage that it causes or the fact that there needs to be an adjustment. And so we're hoping tonight to bring you some insight to make you more aware of imbalance when it does exist in your relationship. Hello to everyone who's coming in.
Yeah.
We appreciate you all. Did you catch some of those names?
We got Team Overflow, Charles and Francine Brown, my dude Wade Smith,
I saw
Miss Rhonda Johnson,
Carmela Jefferson.
Jefferson. Yep, she came in first tonight.
We're trying to get these single people ready.
Yep, got to.
Yeah. This honestly is, when you're single, is a wonderful time for you to start learning what lies ahead in marriage. It helps you prepare. It helps you to understand what you're walking into. For some people, it might help you appreciate your singleness. So we definitely encourage people who are single that may aspire to marriage or even considering relationship. It's that Cole Simone
It
Croon.
is.
Hello, my beautiful niece, tuning in.
Yeah.
Uh, who else we got?
Got Cheryl Jones, and normally Tony Jones be on.
Somewhere nearby.
Yes. And Willie Huggable. Thank you, Willie, for coming in with us.
Yeah, a beautiful couple.
There's our Evergreen Connection. Yes, sir. Mr. Roberts. Yeah. Thank you for coming on with us tonight.
All right. So you want to go ahead and
let's go ahead and get into this. Marriage imbalance, recognizing the imbalance in your marriage, and the things that we come up with is most times we've been through it or going through it or some phase of it. So when we are coming to you with these topics and what we're talking about, we're not telling you anything that we had not experienced. We're not telling you things that we may be going through at the time. But we come up with a way to try to help people get through it. And hopefully you will take it and do something to help your family get through it and just pass that information along.
And we do, I'll jump in real quick. We do recognize that we have not been through everything. There are, and we do try to be aware or sensitive to the fact that we do have people with blended families and those issues are real. So we do try to include those when we can. People who dealt with infidelity, abuse. So we don't mean to overlook those things. So we try to be mindful to give you tools and principles, even if we're not directly mentioning those types of situations. So we hope that what we're giving you are tools to help you deal with those.
All right. So if there are some things you should be able to, there's some things that'll make your marriage look like it's out of balance. Things you may, like you say, you may not focus on. You may not even know your marriage is out of balance. But we're going to talk about some things tonight that can hopefully put your marriage imbalance. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is setting your priorities, putting your priorities in the right perspective. You know, when we prioritize a thing, that becomes the most important thing to us. And really, if you're prioritizing and you're married, you two should come first behind God. You two should come first behind God. Then everything else line up after that.
So another way of saying that is that God comes first.
Right.
And then your relationship with your spouse is secondary. And one thing I think that we probably don't, just in general in Christian churches, sometimes we don't talk about, with God being first, that means your relationship with God comes first. And so your relationship with God has to be maintained and has to be tended to um, above all else, because that relationship with God is what drives everything else, including your marriage. And so, first and foremost, your relationship with God is what comes first. That's not the same as your activity in the church.
Right.
That's not one and the same. Your relationship with God is personal. It's personal. Church is a part of that. Your family is a part of that. God gives us instructions for every area of our lives, including not to forsake gathering together. But we have to be clear that our relationship with God is the number one priority.
Mm-hmm. So, and depending on how you work it out after that, depending on what you have. If you got children, I think your children should come right after you and your spouse relationship. And then if you got a job that's sustained and there's a source to your family, maybe that should come next. But that's just the way that we do it. Now, if you have another way and you set your priorities a different way, that's completely up to you and your spouse. We're not here to tell you how to set your priorities, but we will tell you that your relationship with God first and then each other should be the first two. Now, we can stand by those,
So
right?
let me ask you this. What happens when, speaking of blended families, so what happens when someone has children and they're single and then they marry? Does that mean that spouse is prioritized above the children?
And that's one of the...
I'm asking you.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. For me, now I have never been in a blended family. I don't know.
You. Yeah, so
I don't know.
I'm asking you based on how you understand Christian principles to flow. I'm asking you.
Yes, I think the husband and wife should still be number one each other, and then the children.
Yeah, and if you marry someone who does not have your children's best interests, I think you have to go back and question if you've married who God has appointed for you to marry, for somebody that God would approve of you to marry. So, are you following God's instructions? Because when you marry someone and you already have children, there's no way God is going to prompt you to marry somebody who does not have your children's best interests at heart as well, so that you are safe to nurture that marriage relationship, knowing that it doesn't slight your children any. In fact, that relationship actually enhances the children's lives as well.
It should, yes.
So you shouldn't have to have this whole competition going on. It's a real issue that you have to factor in. Is how do you go about blending the families? How do you go about bringing in the spouse and repositioning the family? Because that's necessary when you're talking about blending the family. You have to reposition, because prior to that it was God first and then your children.
Right. So even with us talking about this, I've heard people that have gotten in blended families, and one that kind of stands out in my mind is Steve Harvey. When he married his last wife, he never used the word, "Those are my stepchildren. Those are my children." And it's according how you set the... I'm be careful how I talk about this, because, like I said, I've been in that situation. But based on his testimony, he made those kids his children. Right. He never distinguished between his natural born children and her children from another marriage. He made them all his children.
Well, I imagine that would be both ways, him and her.
Right. But I'm just saying, I just heard him talk about it. I didn't hear the wife talk about it. And he never made a distinction. So just a little side note. Hopefully, we can get some people on one night to really have a real great discussion about this.
Well, we've had comments from a couple folks that are in blended families. I think Cheryl Jones was the first one to mention it because that was her situation as well.
Right.
And so they've done that nicely from what I can see. And I'm sure there's plenty others that have dealt with that as well. So, but I just wanted to make that clear because you know what happens.
Oh, I know what
It
happens.
happens,
I've seen it.
all too often. I've seen it too, to where the husband or the wife is not ever going to put that husband above her children, or the wife puts her husband above the children, and it does a disservice to the children. So it's very important for you to have that relationship with God in tune so that you can make the choice that God will have you to make,
right,
in reference to adding a spouse into your family. So Corrine Simpkins says she's blended. Yes, ma'am. She's agreeing with that.
Well, we're gonna get some of y'all blended folk up on here so we can have a real sound discussion to the people that are probably going through this. So that's good. Thank y'all for your comments on this. You want to go to the next one?
If you're done with priorities,
yeah. The second subtopic we're going to talk about is scheduling time for your spouse and your family, and limiting time for work. We know it can get out of balance with home life and work life, depending on what kind of job you're in and how much you give or your effort is towards your job. So, you have to schedule that time to make sure that you are servicing your marriage and your family correctly, or that'll get out of balance. And, personally, I can't talk about that one because, some of y'all have heard as me talk about this through the last couple of years we've been doing this about when I coached football. It was that football in that time and the family, it was a little out of order, especially when we had kids. And that became a problem for the Brent sons. Yeah, we're through those days, thank God. So I would say go back and readjust your time if you don't know, if there's a situation with your wife not feel like she's being taken care of, or the husband not feel like they've been taken care of. Go back and look at your schedule and schedule some time for them because they are the most important people in your life.
So how does a person recognize that they're out of balance, whereas work and family is concerned? What does that look like?
It could be real the natural time in itself. Natural time. I mean, if you leave in the morning at 6, you get back home at 8 o'clock, and then like I was doing, I come home and eat and go to sleep, and then there was really no time for us. So you can look at the time itself and see that is out of balance. And then
okay, well let's be real though. I don't think you recognize it was out of balance.
I wouldn't have identified it as that back then. No.
What did you identify it when you were living that? When we were living that, how did you identify
it? It was your discomfort, your disease, what you were saying, the things you were bringing to the table, and you actually let me know this is not good. We ain't spend no time together, and it came from you. Because I use that excuse as I'm working for the family.
That's what I was. That's what I was trying to get to.
What?
It looks like work. It looks like I'm serving the family. Everything I'm doing for you. Everything I'm doing for these kids. How can you say, that there's a problem with my schedule? If I don't work, we don't eat. That type of conversation, because I think a lot of times when work is out of balance with the relationship, that's how it shows up, is you get that defensiveness between the two spouses, that defensiveness as in, one person may be pointing something out and the other person being defensive about it. Even though, and that goes back to communication. Right. That's really the thing I want to emphasize, is it has a lot to do with setting aside time to make sure that you are truly communicating before things get bad. Because truth be told, it wasn't when the children came in that it started. We were out of balance even when it was just you and me.
I say especially when it amplified when the children came.
It was before our first full year of marriage. And I can tell you how I remember, why I know that.
I don't know this, people. Why?
You ain't got to be so dramatic. I'll tell you how I remember that. Because when we moved to Thompson, or
Mm-hmm.
when we first moved, we were in Warrenton for a little bit. Um, I remember telling you that, we living like roommates already, because when you come home, I'm already in the bed. I done had my whole day, done had my meal by myself. And you were like, well, you ain't got to be cooking for me. I'm like, well, then that's just roommates. If you going to live your life and I'm going to live mine, roommates with benefits, basically. You don't remember that?
I don't remember that conversation.
That was during our first year of marriage. So it started early on. But for you, it looked like, well, I'm hustling to make sure my family's taken care of. We got big plans for the future. And I got to work. I got to get my career going. I have to make sure, we have what we need as a family.
Right.
And for me, I'm sitting on the sidelines like, well, why did I get married? Just to be by myself in the house all the time, or to go to work and come home by myself, go to bed by myself, and see you at bedtime, and you up in the morning bright and early and out the door. So that imbalance was there from a very early point. It just escalated, I think, by the time we got to having kids. It was just too much.
And sitting here thinking about it while you're talking, and it kind of takes me back. Um, it was a situation where something had to change in order for me to change my outlook on what she was saying, because I wasn't here, because that was my mindset. I'm doing this for the family, and that's what I was defensive with was. How you gonna tell me not to work? I'm a man. I'm working. I'm doing this for us. Was my excuse until you get that little voice that says, "Dad, I hadn't seen you all week." And like, okay, now I'm starting to listen.
And by this time, we done
Mm.
waited 3 years before we
Ooh,
had kids. And if she old enough to be talking to you like that, that's probably another 2 or 3 years.
probably Camille was talking early. She was understanding stuff early, but see, it had to be something that change ain't changed till it's changed.
Yeah.
We went through those moments, and then I would to do something to recover. We'll spend a whole bunch of time on the weekend together, but then it kind of fall back into that same old pattern. But change ain't changed till it's changed, people. And when I decided to really just step away from that line of coaching and letting that occupy my time, I look back now like, well, I wasted a whole bunch of time with my girls. Not that it was that damaging, I don't think, because I don't think it has been. But I'm glad I recognized it before it was a damaging cause to our relationship, if I can explain it like that.
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
think that's fair to say, and I think it's interesting to notice that once you made the adjustment and how frequently you were working, and you were spending more time at home, the fact that you noticed how much was required just to maintain the household. And mind you, all you don't remember that when you was talking about how much work it is, like taking care of the babies and trying to deal with stuff, the house, like being there with them.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
Yes.
Okay, I was just trying to make sure we was on the same page. He was being quiet. So I mean, so if you think about it, all that time that was being spent at work, and then that I was home not being heard, and trying to and becoming resentful in the process,
Yep.
which was making me more and more angry, more and more discontent. Not making me, but that was my choice for how I handled it.
Right.
And then we ended up with some big time headbutting, because even when you try to, now you want to be understanding about it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even appreciate it. All I can say is, all this time left me with all this to do to manage while I was maintaining my own career.
Right.
I mean, it was I just really wasn't at a point that I could even hear it with an appreciative ear.
And see, the thing about it, the point I want to raise right there, why you say that, I took responsibility for my part in that, her feeling like that, but I didn't take responsibility for her feelings. That was a choice that she made to actually feel like that, right? That's fair.
Well, it was the same thing, immaturity. Just
and I was like, okay, I could take responsibility for me helping her get to this point. Now all I can do is change what I can do. I can't change the way she feel. I can't do nothing to change the way she's feeling because I'm not her. But I can change how I'm operating in this situation. And it did. It was like you said, it was a discussion and it was a
Right.
decision that had to be made.
Right.
So we did that, and that's why I feel like we can come on here and talk about the things that we talk about because we make adjustments in our marriage where it needs to be adjusted. Just some things in life and the changes in life that has to be done. That's why we're talking about this tonight. Those adjustments bring balance to whatever situation you're in.
And I would say now it's easier for us to recognize when things are out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier for us to hear the other person in reference to any kind of communication surrounding that topic, because we've grown and developed and matured in that factor of understanding imbalance and how greatly it impacts the relationship between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to keep in focus that it's not worth losing the relationship we have with each other over the details that are making life hard. Let's
Right.
work together to make these details better for us as a couple, and then that makes the relationship stronger. But I think it had to be intentional. It
Yeah.
was intentional, and there was counseling in there, there was mentoring mixed in there, as life was steady going on. But those are things that we had to learn, and we had to learn how to communicate. We had to learn how to recognize our part of the problem, because it's never one person's
Never one person.
fault. It's never one person's fault. There's always two people in a marriage, and one person may have what seems to be the root cause of the problem, but how that other person responds to it helps to dictate whether that brings the relationship to a solution or if it makes the problem worse.
Right.
And so for me, I was making the problem worse, because I was dealing with the problem the way that I knew to deal with it, which was out of emotions and out of frustration. And that didn't bring us to a place of strength. That brought us to a place of weakness, and it weakened the relationship. So we had to be intentional. We didn't know back then, okay, so when we get to this high level of frustration, we need to iron out these kinks. Sometimes we need to traveling is a strength for us. We always seem to be able to connect better when we travel. That was something that we didn't recognize, how powerful that is, a tool that we can use in order to make our relationship better and to iron out the hard places. Let's play to our strengths. Let's use our strengths.
And let me say this: we and we love our two and the God babies. We love them, but when we travel, we much rather just travel with each other.
Stop it.
I'm just saying.
I know, but
it's just the God's honest truth. So we've learned to find that adjustment, and when we travel together, it's a beautiful thing when we get together and travel together, and it's just us two. It's awesome. It's awesome. But we love our people now. We do.
I like traveling with the kids too.
I can't lie to you people.
I do enjoy traveling with the kids
I
too.
deal
It is
with
a
it.
lot. It
I
is
love
more
them,
stressful.
But I deal with it.
It is more stressful, but I'm not gonna sit here and say that I don't enjoy the family travel, because I do.
I do love yes, I do. Okay.
But we know that for us, spending time together, just the two of us, because honestly, when we dated, we really didn't have a lot of conflict, or we weren't an arguing couple.
No.
I mean, it was pretty smooth. It was when we got together and all these transitions in life started happening, when we had to learn how to maintain a love relationship in the midst of every day.
And see, that's the thing about it. We've talked about this too, and we tell y'all stuff like it was the foundation that was established first that kind of we built upon to help strengthen where we are right now. We had a pretty solid foundation as a dating couple, because we had people that poured into us and kind of showed us how to have relationships, and we looked and learned from our the people that we look up to as mentors, and we just, for me, it's just, and for us, we just learn to build upon that foundation. And the foundation was pretty strong that we established, I think.
Well, I think we were intentional.
Right.
We were both dating with intention. We both had intentions for marriage. We both were intentional about the future. We weren't dating just to kind of, oh, let's see where this goes. I mean, we started out that way, but once we realized that it was something serious, we literally had a conversation about, okay, I think this is becoming something deeper. This is something more serious. Yeah, this is different than previous relationships, that we've had. And we had that conversation very candidly.
Yeah, it's a little different.
And I think that made us work. We planned together. It helped us to be very focused on that journey from dating into marriage.
Right.
So I think that was a foundation for us. But once we got into it, we still really didn't. We didn't really. We thought we were prepared, but it was still very challenging.
Yeah, like I said, we had a foundation, but we still had to build that house, and we're still constructing it right now. Moving on.
All right. So what else is an area of imbalance that can be a problem?
Please balance your budget at your house, with your money, with your spouse. That sounds like some old Dr. Seuss stuff, didn't it?
I don't know what that was, but I think the point we want to make is that manage your finances, because that's an area that's very easy to get out of balance in
quickly.
And that's an area that can tear your marriage apart if you don't stay on top of it. So the advice we're giving is to talk about your finances and talk about them openly, honestly, and frequently. Don't let it linger long. You want to be open and honest. Don't be hiding stuff from each other or trying to slight the other person. Let's be open and honest and have everybody's money working towards the betterment of the family as it is agreed upon. Let's say that. Yeah, as it is agreed upon. If you got to be secretive with your money, then that's something you need to examine as to why you feel that that's the way you need to go about managing your money in your relationship. Because if you're secretive with the money, you got some other secrets too. So it's best to be open and honest, and establish among each other how you're going to manage your finances. And if that leaves room for you to have money that you manage for yourself, that's fine if that's what you all agree upon. But what you don't want to do is take matters into your own hand and to have a financial plan apart from your spouse. You need to be on the same page and to be honest about what you're doing with your finances.
And that statement right there that Sister Rhonda Johnson put back up there that my wife just stated, as agreed upon. People can give you all kind of formulas for how to balance your budget, but it's going to take some time for you to get there. If you're not, to get that established, to get what it's going to take for y'all to balance it, where is comfortable and it feels comfortable for everybody. And to make sure the house is being taken care of when you do it.
And it doesn't necessarily mean controlling, as in, somebody being very controlling over the money. That's not at all what we're advocating. What we're saying is communicate with your spouse about how the two of you agree to manage your finances. It all boils down to agreement. So what works for one couple won't be what works for another.
And let's just talk about balance. Some people think balance is 50-50. Most times it's not.
Right.
You can't. I don't think you can manage money by saying we're going to do everything 50-50, because it normally probably won't work out to 50-50 percentages. But if you learn to work where everybody's comfortable with what's going on and everybody finds peace and agreement in it, that's what works.
Right.
As long as there's peace and agreement, it works. And don't let nobody talk you out of that. Not even us. So whatever works for you and your family, you do that, especially when you talk about your finances.
But you have to be honest and communicating before you can determine what is balance for your family financially.
Right. All right. I think we talked a little bit about this, making sacrifices in your marriage in order to keep it balanced. And I think we talked about it when we talk about our career goals. We talk about how things may not go as you plan to in your career because you have to talk to your spouse about what we're going to do and how we're going to grow in this life together.
Mm-hmm.
And me being that I knew probably within the first 5 years of us being married, well, primarily after the babies were born, that my family would require more time. So I probably could not be a head coach of a football team because I was in that life and I knew how much time it took to do that particular job. And the one thing about it, and being honest with me, I wasn't a great time manager. I would take the time I thought needed for the job to be done. And sometimes that didn't work out with the family. So I knew that was not a good idea for me and my family. And so that's one of the sacrifices that I made. What's one of the sacrifices you made?
In reference to
To the family.
um
It's just an impromptu question of mine, sir. We didn't talk about it.
do I get the answer?
Yes, you do, man.
Okay. A sacrifice I've made is I have because we've agreed upon it, my career has been heavily seconded to whatever the family needs. And so I think I worked a traditional um, job in the school system, regular school hours on school pay for maybe 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And once I had that first child, we made the decision together that, and it was largely because of how he was working. And so what we did is I backed out of, I didn't sign my next contract, and I started adjusting how I was working, where I was working, in order to accommodate the family. So whereas I very easily could have chosen to work full time, be driven to, I mean, it's a lot of things I could have done, quite honestly, that I just chose not to pursue heavily. From an academic standpoint, there's lots of things I really could have done, had potential to do, but I didn't do those things because my interest was more in making sure that I did a good job raising kids. And because when the kids were younger, he was gone so much, we weren't both going to be gone. And so my interest in really chasing those kind of high levels within my career, I just wasn't really, that didn't interest me anymore. I mean, I was happy to do the job that I was doing. I liked that I was helping children and helping families. But I was most concerned about trying to do my best as a parent to my own child at the time, which would become two children. And so my career, and I think I spent 15 years working part time.
You still basically work part time, don't you?
Well, that's what it says on paper.
Okay.
But my time don't balance out to that.
Okay.
I do have control of my time. Um, but I mean, most of y'all that know me know that I've always been like a high achieving person. And that's what kind of comes naturally for me. That's what I enjoy. I like things that are challenging. I like being a leader among my peers. But all of that just was not nearly as important to me as trying to do an excellent job as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the sacrifice that I made that I have zero regret about. Zero. So my focus, so anyway, that was my sacrifices. I didn't pursue, you know, being a big, I didn't open a clinic, which is something I could have done, considered doing. I did not open a clinic. I did not partner to open a clinic. That opportunity was there. I did not build this huge business or work at the state level and all those kind of things that I probably would have done if I had not chosen to prioritize my kids. And I'm happy for the sacrifice and I enjoy it, but that was the sacrifice that I probably the biggest sacrifice I made, which I hesitate to call it a sacrifice because I didn't want to do those things once I had kids. I just the interest just kind of wasn't there.
All right. So, in closing, like our bishop, we got one more thing we're going to talk about tonight, and that's going to bring balance to your relationship is forgive and apologize. That's the one thing that can keep your marriage in balance.
Out of balance if you don't do it.
If you don't do that, well, yeah. But if you do it, it keeps your marriage in balance. So make sure you are, if something is happening in a relationship, make sure you apologize and then do your best to forgive that person or forgive your spouse. Seems like to me your spouse should be one of the easiest people to forgive and to say.
But we all know in reality.
I said should.
Okay, go ahead. I just had to say
you
that.
know.
Go ahead.
So that should be one of the things you should be able to do, but it's something that may have to be worked on by you.
It's so easy for that part of it to get out of balance, though, because let's be honest, we take for granted that there you go. Look at Sister Rhonda. She said should. That's the operative word. But in reality, we know that our spouse is the easiest person sometimes to be mad at, or to catch feelings with very easily. And so that's an area where it's really easy to get out of balance, and that you're taking for granted your need to forgive, your need to apologize to your spouse. So we have to hold that in high regard, that it's important to keep that pathway between each other clear. And I mean, we take that scripture lightly sometimes, where God talks about to where your prayers are hindered. When you around here holding a grudge against your spouse, it gets in the way of your prayer life, which goes back to that number one relationship, which is your relationship with God. So if that marriage relationship, you've got some strife between you and your spouse, it interferes with your prayer life. God holds you accountable for how you treat your spouse. And so it's important not to take that lightly or feel like it's okay to treat your spouse worse than you would treat other people, because a lot of times that's what happens is you feel like, well, they ain't going nowhere. You just say what you want to say and
do what you want to do,
and and whatever, because they're the close. Sometimes we're harshest to the people that are closest to us, and that's out of order. That's out of balance,
right?
And so that's something for you to be mindful of, to make sure that you maintain balance in that relationship with your spouse. You can offend your spouse without intending to. It don't mean you had bad intentions. And just because you offend your spouse and you didn't mean to, that don't mean that you shouldn't apologize. I say all the time, you might not have meant to step on my toe, but it still hurt. And I would like an apology.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you didn't intend, to hurt me, or you might have said or have done something or overlooked me, or something that was of interest to me, I still, if I'm letting you know that something you did, brought me some discomfort or pain or whatever, offense, I still expect you to acknowledge that, and for us to be able to grow from it, even if you don't feel like you did anything wrong. The effect that it had on me as your spouse,
I should apologize.
Yeah, if it hurt me, it ought to hurt you. That's the way I see it.
Right, because we are one.
You got it. There you go. Hey, Miss Denisha Kroon, that's my sweet niece. Got two of them on tonight. That's the record.
Yeah, that's all right, doesn't it? So I think we've had a pretty productive discussion tonight. Thanks for the involvement and all the comments, family, for just coming in and putting your input in. Because like I say, the comments that you make, we read them off, and maybe those comments help somebody. So we just want to thank you for coming in and being a part of this Monday night with us.
Yeah.
So with that said,
Corey said, be sincere in your apologies. That's a good point. Very much so.
Right.
All right. Well, we appreciate y'all. We hope y'all have a wonderful rest of the week.
Yep.
And I'm sure you would love to close us out.
I do. So, with that said, from the lady and the coach, we love y'all. Good night.